Well, those of you feel free to share the recording link within your network. And as for the speakers, I request them to turn on their cameras as long as the network allows to do so. But this is, again, it's not, for everyone who's joining us on any of the platform, either you're joining us through Zoom or you're joining us to any of the light platforms. I mean, it's more of a discussion form of a format. It won't be you won't be having a lot of speakers and panelists today. We'll initially provide the presentation of one of the recent studies that we conducted, and later that will kind of have take this forward in more of a discussion manner. So now, just to kind of mention a few things before we actually go down to our actual presentation, that this report is being established under the auspices of the Green CPEC Alliance that was established between Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Pakistan China Institute, and Dr. Christoph Nadopil from, while it was established, he was from Fudan University, but currently he's serving as the director of Griffith Asia Institute. And when you actually talk about green industrialization or greening of the overall China-Pakistan economic corridor, CPEC has actually played, Green CPEC Alliance has actually played a very critical role. And this particular thematic focus that is on the green industrialization or Chinese green manufacturing, it has been a focus of the Alliance for quite some time. Last year, we were able to do some of the very good policy analysis and in really close, I won't say collaboration, but under the guidance, or you can also kind of say as an audience with the Pakistan's Board of Investment. Even this year, we tried actually engaging a lot of the SEZs, the relevant stakeholders within Pakistan as well as in China. So yeah, now for the sake of audience, just to kind of mention few points before we actually go down to the presentation of the study, and just to kind of very briefly provide you an overview of what what is the current landscape of the SEZs in Pakistan, what has been the progress, and what has been some of the very interesting recent developments. Because now more than ever, you see a lot of announcement, a lot of initiatives coming in from the what you see, the angle of Ministry of Planning Development Special Initiatives. Our Board of Investment has been talking about it lately. And again, just to be very candid, industrialization, either it's the green or else it's currently need of the hour for Pakistan. So now, just to provide you a very brief overview, I'll be pitching two angles before we actually go down to some of the findings of what the study actually is. Firstly, it's kind of providing a very overview of what has been the recent developments, and then coming towards what exactly is the direction that Chinese financing is taking, and how should Pakistan kind of position it so it will be in position to kind of attract those investments. So, I mean, and I believe the first part you would all be pretty aware of that. If you look at the special economic zones and the framework that was conceived, it was kind of conceived as to be the productive backbone of the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and was to be operationalized under the SEZ Act that was back in 2012. So what we did was we identified 9 prioritized sites for development between since the last, not the last, it's been almost last 8 to 9 years, but it was again for the time frame of 2017 to 2030. And the vision was to actually pivot Pakistan from an import dependent, or you could also say a consumption driven economy, towards more an export oriented industrialization through co-located manufacturing clusters, and that those clusters were supposed to benefit a lot in the form of fiscal incentives, such as these year holidays, duty-free machinery imports, and even the one window facilitation operation that is being provided by the Board of Investment. Apart from that, there were capital relocation from China's eastern provinces and integration within CPEC's energy and transport sites as well. So the first 9 zones, I mean, even I might not be able to directly name them, but Rashakai, Dhabeji, even Allama Iqbal, and etc., and all that, what's initially considered sectorally differentiated. Some of them were targeting the food processing industries. Then they were also kind of targeting some ceramics, textiles, marble, minerals, light engineering, and pharmaceuticals as well. And the Board of Investment was actually considered as the lead agency for a bilateral joint work for the bilateral JWG, or the joint working group that we established on industrial cooperation alongside China's NDRC. So that was the initial idea. But I think this is also something that we're all well aware of, that progress against those original ambitions has been structurally uneven. As of, if you look at as of 2026, only 4 SEZs have, and even just advanced beyond the planning stage to kind of partial implementations or the allocation of the plots. For example, Rashakai in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Lama Iqbal has made some progress, Tabeji in Sindh, and Bostan in Balochistan, while the remaining 5 remain still largely at the very feasibility or early infrastructure stages as well. So that was an initial idea. And if you kind of look why we actually haven't been able to achieve that, or why shouldn't be calling the underperformance, but what has been a major lax, it's kind of reflected compounding constraints such as the lagging of provision of some of the utilities, such as the power infrastructure has been one of the challenge. We even scope kind of a lot of different models, particularly dedicated gas and grid stable electricity tariffs that weren't actually competitive with the regional benchmarks. Then there were it was one of the very big challenges, that was the security risk that kind of affected Chinese investment segments. And then apart from that, there were a lot of unresolved land lease bottlenecks at federal zones, documentation, acquisition cost, weak forward linkages to those export logistics that we actually have been talking about. So, I mean, I think the report might discuss this in further details, but that's kind of a lot of some of the very key challenges that we actually faced. But now recently, the recalibration of, because I mean, we all know that CPEC 2.0 was actually formed as the industrialized phase. So the recalibration under the CPEC phase 2 was to reposition SEZs from an administrative point of view into their operationally, to make them operationally viable industrial platforms. So I mean, the kind of, even we saw developments that the SEZs, not the ones under CPEC, but overall kind of expanded from just 44 in 2018 or 19 to roughly even 35 newly notified zones that were coordinated by the Board of Investment and the CPEC Industrial Cooperation Development projects as well. There have been recent progress. Recently, after the introduction of Udan Pakistan, or Pakistan Economic Growth Plan Framework, it has also been talking a lot about it. Again, it has also been operationalized through a structured action plan that is aligned with the federal government around Pakistan's 5E framework that also kind of prioritize some of these industries. And it talks a lot about, beyond the initially envisioned sectoral areas, to a lot about the CPEC, localization of Pakistan's RE value chain industries as well. So based on the above, what I've just said, kind of one message is very clear, and that is that what we wanted didn't actually work. So what should exactly the country do to expedite them now? What should be there within the industrial policies and etc. Because we have seen a lot of other ASEAN countries leveraging the Chinese expertise. So that's one thing that's already up there. I'll be again very brief. The second angle that we also kind of are looking into is the changing investment landscape of China. Let me try making sense, but we'll go into a lot of the details as we start discussing the study. That is that at its core, the this initiative that we've taken is also trying to address a gap on how we understand the Chinese energy engagements in Pakistan, not just in terms of the financial flows, the capital flows that is incoming, but how it is the investment is actually structured and also involving over the time. So again, if you kind of look into the very early phase of the CPEC, the model was relatively straightforward. It was dominated by large, we all know, state-led infrastructure project, primarily that were the power generation and transmission, and some transport. And they were kind of financed through sovereign-backed debt and implemented by the Chinese state-owned enterprises. Now, that model did actually play a strong role, a very critical role in addressing Pakistan's energy shortages, but also we also see a lot of financial obligations and expose some of the structural risks coming out of those investments. So now what we're seeing is a very clear transitioning away from that model. I mean, the Chinese overseas energy finance is becoming a lot more selective, a lot more commercially oriented. Policy bank lending has slowed. New actors such as the state-owned commercial banks, export credit agencies, and increasing private firms, I mean, such as Longi, Green Energy, they're kind of taking a more prominent role. And at the same time, the risk-sharing arrangements have also changed. There are a lot of joint ventures, just like their risk-sharing arrangements are there. So that's, again, rather than relying purely on the sovereign borrowing model, the model is actually changing. So in Pakistan specifically, this shift is also being reinforced by the domestic conditions that we actually have. How industrial electricity tariffs shifted, circular debt constraints, growing demand for reliable and affordable power. And what is actually happening as a result is we're seeing the rise of this decentralized private sector-led solutions, especially in the commercial and industrial space, like the corporate PPAs, captive generation, distributed solar and battery systems as well. So taking lead from that, what we have actually, SGPI has actually done is conducted a study on SEZ-led green industrialization and how Pakistan can compete for China's green manufacturing FDI, because we have been looking into a lot of the international examples where countries have actually done a lot of progress. If you look at the ASEAN, Indonesia, Vietnam, they've actually attracted a lot of these investments. So what I'm going to do, perhaps we've spoken a lot already. Just like initially mentioned, we'll kind of perhaps later try making it more of a conversation form. So with this, I'll initially invite our colleagues who authored this report, Arfa Ijaz and Aisha Naeem, who will be taking us through the presentation of this study. So I think with this, I'll initially hand it over to Arfa, Aisha, whoever actually wants to take it forward, please. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can please request the MIS team to display the slides. Yes, thank you. So hello everyone, thank you for joining us today for our report launch on how Pakistan can compete for China's green manufacturing FDI. And to understand our position today, we first have to seriously recognize that this global energy transition that is taking place, it's not just this environmental agenda anymore. It has become an industrial race which sort of decides whether we are capturing high value investments and whether we are securing our supply chains against global shocks, which we recently saw in the case of US-Iran war. Now, if you can please move on to the next slide, to look at the trends of these global capital investments that have been taking place across electric power, industry, manufacturing, and transport. One thing that is pretty clear is that China is leading this global clean technology landscape. And over the past decade, China has built some very dominant production capacity across solar panels, lithium-ion batteries, EVs, and also has some massive industrial expansion. And one thing that also, another thing that's very evident is that they are the central manufacturing leader of the global clean tech economy. And this is supported by their extensive domestic supply chains that they have and the advanced manufacturing capabilities that they have across all of these sectors. Now, if we can move on to the next slide, given this domestic overcapacity that China has, and then also some external trade barriers that have been put forward by US and European countries, these Chinese clean tech firms, they're now looking to move outward. And it's been called as the green leap outward because they have committed over $200 billion in overseas green manufacturing investments across more than 50 countries now. And but one thing that is really important to note here is that these investments, they're highly selective, and they're strategically flowing to ASEAN countries, to the Middle East, to Europe, and these host countries, if we look at the sort of the mechanism why they're capturing these investments, it is because they offer this very coherent bundle of industrial pull factors, such as there's reliable infrastructure, there are market access advantages, and there are also some very strong policy frameworks to support these investments and attract them in the first place. If you can please move on to the next slide. Now, looking at China's own industrial manufacturing capabilities and its investments that have been, focused on other countries, its green leap outward, as we called it. This brings us to Pakistan's own, what we're calling a paradox. If you can please move on to the next slide. So, these are some of the recent investments that China has made as part of its changing investment manifesto, where it's been led by the Western trade barriers, which have forced China to relocate its industries, not just outside of its domestic base, but also the other country that it was investing in, such as ASEAN, and also the key pull factor that we've just discussed. Now, if you can please move on to the next slide. Now, one very important thing to note here in Pakistan's context is that why Pakistan is missing out on these investments, despite possessing theoretically possessing what Chinese green capital is searching for globally. We have the raw materials. We also have the domestic market, as has been made evident by the massive consuming of Chinese imports of solar modules. And Pakistan also has the strategic geographic positioning that China would want. And very, very importantly, it has been the flagship partner of BRI through CPEC. And yet, despite all of these structural advantages that Pakistan has, it remains largely absent from the global map of these outward clean tech manufacturing projects that China has been investing and engaging in. And we are missing out on this very consequential wave of global capital. This is also one very important thing to note here as well, is that maybe this is because when China was investing initially in Pakistan through CPEC, it was during the first phase of CPEC, these investments, they were characterized by some sovereign-backed infrastructure lending and then Chinese SOEs with state-guaranteed returns. But today, this nature of Chinese capital and investments, it has sort of fundamentally changed, and these investments, they are being driven by Chinese private capital, which have this changed criteria of operating on commercial imperatives. And these private markets, these private firms, they're seeking markets to penetrate and supply chains to secure, and they're not basing their relocation based on just diplomatic ties, as has been in Pakistan's case, the Iron Brotherhood vision. It's increasingly more focused on the commercial imperative and the profitability of these investments. And if we can move on to the next slide. And Pakistan does not, and this is not to say that Pakistan does not have any of these advantages that China is currently seeking. It does have those competitive advantages, but as we have sort of like shown in this report, that it has largely failed to operationalize these advantages. And what these advantages are, that Pakistan does have this exceptional renewable energy potential, high solar insulation, and then some technically viable wind potential as well, which has been validated by World Bank too. And then we do also have some very critical mineral resources, including copper, lithium, and cobalt, which are the upstream inputs that upon which the global battery and EV supply chains depend. And then we also have the domestic market, as has been highlighted earlier too. But and also like our geographic positioning, it also offers this very strategic advantage to both the Chinese firms for a production location with a very different tariff exposure to bypass the very tightening Western trade barriers that it has been facing. Now, despite all of these advantages, there are some structural barriers to entry, if we can move on to the next slide, which have been very actively deterring Chinese private capital. And the most fundamental barrier is security here. And as we saw that the Chinese embassy, it requires NOCs that formally restrict investor movement to major cities like Islamabad and Lahore, and they're kept out of any promising industrial zones, the SEZs, which if they attempt to visit, they have to face waiting periods for local NOCs, then demands for police clearances from the districts, and bulletproof vehicle rentals, and some hundreds of special security personnel, which is not very investor friendly. Also, the Pakistan special economic zones, which are a very potentially lucrative site for these green manufacturing hubs, sort of. They are these SSCs. They were created by administrative decrees and not by taking a very extensive overview of the investor needs. And some of these have hence resulted in some inland locations that lack usual port access, and they do not have the plug-and-play readiness which is required for such manufacturing hubs. And one of the examples is the Rashika SEZ, which despite having completed a 1.8 billion rupees internal electricity grid, the zone cannot deliver the power to its enterprises because of a pending NEPA distribution license, and the government has revoked a prior commitment to provide bulk electricity rates. So this is a big deterrent to potential investors because of the lack of infrastructure, which also is ready in some of the cases, as just has been highlighted, but because of some policy irregularities and bottlenecks, cannot really be delivered. Another very important barrier is the regulatory labyrinth, as has been called, because of the policy inconsistency and some very multi-agency approvals that the investors have to look for, that can, in some cases, consume more than 2 years. And any investor who's seeking to open a facility, they must navigate this very fragmented federal and provincial agencies network, and there are frequent reversals on industrial tariffs, and then there's some energy pricing that also affects the policy stability that private Chinese firms they require. And one very important element that has been repeatedly noted in this report is the absence of any comprehensive and concrete industrial identity that Pakistan must have in order to attract Chinese investors. We have been pitching this very generic value proposition of based on our diplomatic ties, but as we have seen in the case of Vietnam, which has pitched electronics manufacturing. In case of Indonesia, they have pitched battery supply chains via their nickel reserves. Pakistan has till now failed to really define its value proposition, and there's an absent industrial identity. We do not have a clear sector map or industrial policy where Pakistan can answer the Chinese investors' foundational questions, which is why invest here in Pakistan. So there is this need of a very clear industrial policy and a need to identify the strategic advantages that Pakistan has, and then also to package them and pitch them in a way that's very attractive to the investors. Now, I would please request my colleague Irfan Ijaz, who has co-authored this report, to please take this forward from here.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Pleasant afternoon to all. Now I would like the MIS team to please move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so when we talk about manufacturing, minerals play a very huge role in this. So if we talk about the Indonesian case study or their example, we see that Indonesia attracted nearly 68 billion in FDI by restricting raw exports and leading to their battery cell and EV manufacturers to build these supply chains vertically and have such chains being built in a domestic fashion. So learning from them, we see that here in Pakistan, we have plenty of copper reserves, we have lithium, and especially we have sodium, which leads to a very fascinating case for sodium-ion batteries and their local manufacturing and supply chains in Pakistan, because that would be a very, what can I say, a very interesting case for Pakistan, which is possible since we have such abundance of sodium, and regarding lithium, the supply chains can be a little more complex. So that's a very interesting case for Pakistan. Apart from that, we can also build EV components and sort of the copper wire harnesses, which are a very, very important sort of a backbone of solar and battery systems in Pakistan. So, and generally, so these are some things that, you know, are very, are the sort of a very important aspect when we talk about localizing manufacturing in Pakistan. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So when we see our SEZs, we sort of need to rethink them as, you know, plug-and-play infrastructure. So here I would like to mention the example of Atlantis SEZ in South Africa, which is a very interesting example. They have been able to achieve sort of, you know, really high technologies such as water recycling and also waste recycling and other segments which are really important when we talk about SEZs. So the case is that they moved on a project to project basis. They did not jump into, you know, risk heavy and massive rollouts all at once. That is a very interesting thing to think about. Along with that, when we talk about our SEZs, first and foremost, we need Section 11 of the SEZ Act to be operationalized, because without that, we can't really take you know, advantage of the single window facility. And along with that, when you talk about renewables are very important in this case, because when we have renewables on site, we don't have to you know, face transmission losses and other problems related to the traditional grid structure. Having renewables and on site within SEZs can really support in having better access to electricity and all. And moreover, we also require advanced water recycling systems, because they're mandatory for water-intensive solar panel manufacturing. Along with that, AI-ready broadband treated as a core utility, because AI sort of is, you know, a very important component of next level technology infrastructure. Along with that, if we want to bring in Chinese capital, we would require SCZs to be de-risked. And that would mean, you know, if we go forward with land allocation without guaranteed utilities, that's not going to be beneficial at all in bringing in investors and, you know, building investor confidence. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So when we talk about prerequisites for entry, security reform is, you know, as mentioned by Aisha, it is a very important component in this. So if we sort of replace, you know, Chinese embassy non-objection certificates with, you know, zone-specific biometric digital clearance systems that could really increase efficiency in having better security protocols and all. Moreover, if we sort of move from having this incident to incident basis for security deployment, we need to move towards more stronger bilateral governance. And along with that, when we talk about our SEZs, we have a very interesting recommendation that we need to build a 60-day resolution, mandate for any disputes for the investors, within the SEZs through a tribunal. And along with that, we need to transition from state-owned enterprises, dependent promotion towards more Chinese private sector engagements and bringing B2B engagements. Along with that, the most important thing is having a technology development model, which sort of integrates risk-sharing mechanisms. So, the risks are reduced for Chinese investors. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Now, when we talk about industrial and institutional transformation, we sort of need to, stop or seize generic marketing. We need to have credit-backed demand projections, especially for solar and EV, as they are the most booming sectors in Pakistan and have the most potential for localization. And their case has been strengthened after the energy crisis as well. So then we move towards, talking about the Vietnam model, which was, they brought pre-packaged land, labor, and clearance directly to Chinese investors. They didn't wait for the investors to come to them. They approached the investors directly on their own. So that was a very proactive approach that they initiated. And along with that, when we talk about institutional reform, sort of, as the Special Investment Facilitation Council, SIFC, is which was, created like 3 years ago. It's a very, a useful body, and it can be sort of, strengthened if it is provided with binding authority for inter-agency approvals, which can speed up and streamline approvals with more efficiency. Along with that, there's a need to renegotiate the independent power producer capacity payments, and because they're dollar-backed payments, and when we talk about the circular debt, it's a big issue. So we need to renegotiate these IPPs, and so that our industrial electricity tariffs, they can be reduced and we can have more industrial resilience. Along with that, there's a slight incorrection over here. It's actually production linked incentives, PLIs, which are based on the Make in India model, which will be discussed in the slide ahead. So if we could just move ahead, please. Yeah. So when we talk about the PLI model, it incorporates this sort of an approach that incentives are provided or dispersed against proper outputs, production outputs, not just the capital inputs. So this is relevant for Pakistan because it's fiscally safe when we talk about IMF constraints, because no tax revenue is being spent until actual manufacturing and economic activity occurs. Moreover, when we talk about the Vietnamese model, we see that they had a very proactive approach in bringing in investors. They built plug-and-play parks, and they physically went to China to offer tailored, relocation packages to bring in their industries to Vietnam. And this approach is really relevant for Pakistan because we need to move from broad investment openness towards more targeted and sector-specific value propositions in order to bring in prospective investors and partners. So if we could move into the Next slide, please. When we talk about the localization sequencing in Pakistan, we start with immediate assembly first and foremost. So we have the market demand for solar and EVs, of course. And if we just start off with their assembly first and foremost, for example, KD EV kits, which are basically completely knocked down EV kits. These can be assembled locally within Pakistan along with solar cells to modules. And when we talk about phase 2 of this, we bring in our raw materials which are available locally within Pakistan. Then when we talk about phase 3, we see that by that time we'll be able to build strong supply chains for domestic clean tech within Pakistan. So the most crucial insight for this is that phase 2 and 3 need to be contractual conditions of phase 1 market access, because as Professor Stella from Indiana University, Bloomington, had instructed when we had her over for a recent webinar, she had mentioned that, when we talk about the Japanese automotive example in Pakistan, we were just stuck at local assembly. We weren't able to move towards manufacturing. We just got stuck at the assembly stage. So we need to avoid that in order to be able to build localized supply chains. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So the phase 1 and 2 technology trees over here, and as we see for the solar ecosystem, we start off with the module assembly, graduating to solar cell manufacturing in phase 2. As we can see, we have a high demand for rooftop solar in Pakistan. And when we talk about batteries, we move from pack assembly in the first phase towards cell manufacturing in the second phase. As batteries demand is scaling. It was 1.25 gigawatt hours to 8.75 gigawatt hours by 2030. It is projected to reach that amount. And for electric vehicles, now we have 2 and 3 wheelers as of now, but soon we'll be moving to 4 wheelers and passenger EVs as well. So we can in the phase 2 we can move towards their local manufacturing as well. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. Just get one more slide. Yeah. So in this report, we have sort of built a 5-pillar roadmap, and the first is security normalization. Moving on to pillar 2, which would be SEZ operationalization. Instead of bringing in more SEZs, we need to focus on sort of structurally fixing the ones that are available right now. And pillars 3 and 4 are related to industrial identity, as Aisha had talked about as well, and institutional reforms. Pillar 5 is related to how we can sort of build the soft infrastructure in terms of green jobs and skills and workforce which is ready for the future of industrialization. So yes, thank you so much. That's it. Our presentation is over. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, both Aisha, Arfan. That was really interesting. As we move to the discussion session, let me also request all of our audience, either you've joined us online, you've joined us either to any of the online platforms, LinkedIn or Zoom. Please feel free to drop in your questions and the comments and suggestions in the chat or the Q&A box. But let us kind of in parallel start with few of the suggestions that I actually have, few of the questions that we actually have. And as we come up with further comments, we'll discuss those as well. So instead of, asking right away some of the few questions that I actually had in mind, Arfa and Aisha, let me just pick one from the chat box that we actually have. And initially, so basically the idea is that Pakistan, if you talk about economic transformation, if you talk about any what you say fiscal reforms, one thing that always comes, and I think both Arfa and Aisha kind of refer to it, is that we're currently under two of the IMF programs, that is the Resilience and Sustainability Facility, as well as the Extended Funding Facility, EFF, as well as RSF. So the question I'll pick is the first one, is that if Pakistan's SEZs under the CPAF have struggled for even the time when generous tax breaks were available, how do we actually expect the country to build a more supportive environment for the special economic zones, particularly, or the support environment from them, when the IMF programs no longer allows those kind of subsidies? So what I can, Aisha, Arfa, do is to perhaps initially provide my few cents on it, and then feel free to add it if you would further allow to do so. So again, a few days back, I actually have been meeting a lot of the special economic zones, and a very candidly, or perhaps a very honest starting point for mine, is that the underperformance, you actually call it, or a very underdeveloped stage of the SECs, it wasn't really actually about subsidies or any incentive schemes that were too small. It isn't actually the case. If you look at the Russia Kai, it is a very clear example. It actually had 100% Chinese state-owned FDIs. It actually had a lot of these exemptions under the SEZ Act 2012, and even almost, I don't exactly remember the value, but perhaps Aisha, fucking like, it actually also had 70 to 90% of Chinese shareholding. Yet it's still stalled at the stage where it is still in the phase of colonization. The industries are actually growing. And the reasons were actually not fiscal. They were security risks. I think both Arfa actually embedded that as the very first component of the reforms that she actually made. There was security risk around the zone. There was slow plot release. There were no the power connection, this SEZ specific from NEPRA, no title transfer mechanisms. The one window facility is there, but again, I think they both kind of also refer to some of the challenges that we actually see. And there was also, we actually had a regulator to oversee the B2B issues. Honestly, no one is actually taking that ownership of the overall process as well. So when the IMF, if you look at any of its latest reviews, it requires Pakistan to amend the SEZ Act by 2027 and phase out any of the profit, because I'll just kind of rephrase the term, profit-based tax incentives, along with the Board of Investments, SEZ authorities' powers to grant them. It is essentially taking away. So, my first statement was be that it's kind of taking away the tool that actually really didn't deliver. But again, at the same time, the opportunity or the good news is that the shift the IMF is actually pushing for, it's more from shifting from a profit-based to kind of a cost-based incentive, and that is actually a step in the right direction. Tax holidays reward companies when they, whether they hire, invest, hire, or export or not, and they're losing much of the values. Anyway, under the new some of the new tax arrangements as well. However, these cost-based instruments, such as accelerated depreciation, investment tax credits, reductions of at the local sourcing, employment, R&D credits, infrastructure, etc., and all that, and the cost sharing, they're all very tied to what a company actually does on the ground, and there's something that are IMF compatible, and again, far better at separating serious industrial investments from those just looking after or chasing after the incentives. So combined with non-fiscal fixes and concessional financing for zone infrastructure, which sits outside the IMF subsidy ceiling, Pakistan can actually end up with a comparatively strong environment for SEZs than the phase one actually ever offered. So what I think is that the constraint is basically the design quality and not the fiscal space that actually existed. So yeah, that's going to be my first response to the question that's actually there. But I think I'll let either Aisha or Arfa if they actually want to add anything. So please, Aisha, Arfa, please go ahead.
I would completely second what you just said, that these tax breaks, which were referred to in the question, which IMF has, mandated the gradual phase out of these breaks, they were not alone efficient, and they were not, they did not alone generate the industrialization which was needed in the first phase of CPEC, which kind of does, it kind of shows that these fiscal incentives, they're not these the primary attraction point. We need to complement them with some non-fiscal fixes, as you just said, to build this the policy coherence and functional utilities, and also the one-stop shop, as you said, the one-window framework, which does exist on paper, but it needs to be functional and operational. Because if any investor has to visit multiple ministries outside the zone, despite the existence of such OSS, it means that these one-stop shop mechanisms, they have sort of failed the investors. So it is kind of evident in itself that these tax breaks, they have sort of failed in the past to attract the investors. So the lack of them should not be a problem. Instead, what has been missing are the administrative and operational, smoothness
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
coherence.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Aisha. And I think that's also what I was leading to. Now, again, from the debate that Aisha, Arfa, you were also kind of making is that, and one point that actually has been coming up, why, I mean, one thing that we all know is that Pakistan, if you look at it as a market for the China, is really something. I mean, because if you look at the market of the solar PVs, if you look at the market of BESS, even if you look at how rapidly the market of EV is evolving, definitely it is considered as a very important export destination, China. But as opposed to that, local industry that actually hasn't grown. So one concept that keeps on coming, it is especially if you look into what is actually happening post geopolitical war, or amid the tension between trade tensions that actually rapid few almost, it's been almost a year with the tariffs constantly being imposed by the US as well as China, and that tariff war that we actually caught up in, ASEAN supply chain disruptions we actually saw. So considering all of that, do you actually kind of I mean, what if the study kind of talks about, can Pakistan position itself as an alternate manufacturing base within the overall region? I mean, for example, if the manufacturing can actually be done there, and then using this Pakistan as a destination to kind of diverse the overall supply chains for China. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on this.
I would like to say that first and foremost, the tariff structure for industries needs to be reformed urgently, because electricity is so expensive that it's leading to our industry sort of, falling apart, and they need this support. They need electricity to be sold at affordable prices for them. And along with that, when we add such levies such as the captive power plant levy, which was imposed this year, it just adds additional costs for industries and threatens their survival, especially if you talk about export-oriented industries such as textile industry and all. So I think the first and foremost thing that we need in order to support true industrialization and sustainable industrialization, of course, that would require tariff reforms and affordable electricity for industries and supportive policies which enhances their growth.
Thank you so much, Arfa. I'll be picking one more question from the chat now. I think, yeah, okay, let's pick the first one. So basically, the question that we actually have is that given the Chinese capital is actively relocating but flowing past Pakistan, what would it actually take in concrete and forward-looking terms for CPEC Phase 2 SEZs to land a meaningful share of that flow over the next 3 to 5 years? So, Aisha, Alpha, if you want to kind of again add, but I'll perhaps pick few points from one, perhaps from what Aisha mentioned, and two from and perhaps I'll start from there what Arfa mentioned, and then Aisha, you can perhaps add on to it. So, I mean, what actually is, I mean, the very simple thing is what actually needs to be done if you look at how the China's financing is flowing. So, I mean, to me, a very candid answer is that Pakistan perhaps, I mean, the markets in Pakistan have actually, I mean, the market-based approach has worked. So, Pakistan actually needs to stop perhaps selling the SEZs and start, uh, correct me if I'm wrong, Alpha, but perhaps the point was that it needs to actually start selling the value chains. I mean, the firms these days are kind of not relocating to find these tax holidays, or they're actually relocating to find free access to large external markets. That's actually something that's going to drive the discussion forward. So they're looking for predictable operating environments. They're looking for integrated supplier ecosystem. So the forward-looking pitch has to be built around 2 or 3 anchor value chains where Pakistan actually has a very genuine logic. For example, with the electric vehicles and 2 to 3 wheelers being the obvious first, or not the obvious, perhaps one of the very first candidates given Pakistan's new energy vehicle policy. BYD has already kind of planned mid 2026 assembly entry, and a very underpenetrated domestic demand of over uh, the whole population of Pakistan that can actually serve as the demand anchor for this space. Same, again, picking from what Arfa mentioned, that electronics assembly, uh, even looking into the agro processing, pharmaceuticals, APIs are some very credible second tier candidates as well. So, uh, any pitch to, I mean, to an investor, I mean, even if you can even look beyond the China to look into some what we've actually also engaged the Saudis. So, it kind of pitch eventually to any investor then becomes specific and operational. Like a designated EV cluster at Rashakai or Allama Iqbal Industrial City with co-located battery, motor, and BMS suppliers, guaranteed grids, and gas connectivity at a very notified SEZ-specific NEPRA tariff, or the NEPRA tariff, captive generation licensing, bonding, warehousing, and an anchor offtake agreement, rather than a very generic invitation to notified zone with a tax holiday attached. So that's again something, even if it could have worked a few years back, it definitely won't be working now. So again, perhaps let me again come first listen what Aisha, Arfa actually have to say on that, and perhaps then after them I can perhaps add a couple of more thoughts from mine. But yes, Arfa, Aisha, if you want, if anyone of you want to add anything at this point.
I'd just say that last time when we were talking in our webinar related to FDI, we talked about this, that for Chinese investors, it's not as much incentives that attract them over. It's more, having policy certainty, a proper regulatory environment, and, having easy investor facilitation mechanisms. So when we're talking about CPEC 2.0, we really need to have those set in place so that we can approach investors and have more B2B engagements in the private sector engagements, because they are the sort of the leading source for Chinese capital now. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, let me check if Aisha wants to add anything at this point, perhaps.
Nope, I'll just, I think Arfa did say the very relevant thing here, that Pakistan's own experience has shown that the SEZs under CPEC's first phase, they struggled despite all of these very generous incentives that were offered because of the administrative friction that Pakistan's SEZs had, and also some, delayed utility provision, etc., etc. So if Pakistan does need to build a genuinely supportive environment without depending on tax subsidies. It needs to offer structural and operational competitiveness and not rely entirely on fiscal competitiveness instead.
Sure, thank you. And then I'll just post another question. A part of it we've already perhaps answered, but again, let me just pitch it since the question is there. That how does geopolitical restructuring and friend shoring, for you kind of mentioned one of your slides, I guess, can create new opportunities for Pakistan in global clean tech supply chain? So yeah, if you'd like to briefly respond to this one as well.
Good thing. So I believe that due to the changing landscape of political relations and all of these things, I believe that Pakistan has a very strategic advantage if it does, sort of capitalize and leverage its brotherhood with China. Since we are, just next door to China, we have a lot of benefits in this situation. Considering we're neighbors with them and they're in such close proximity, as if they're going all the way and investing in ASEAN and Gulf economies, we need to sort of take advantage of the perks that we have right now and leverage them in such a way that we can bring in investors and we can learn from ASEAN and Gulf economies, especially Middle East and North Africa, what sort of pull factors they had, which we have analyzed in the report as well, and sort of learn from them and bring those factors, into our local ecosystem and economy as well, in order to, leverage our partnership and our relations with China in a truly beneficial way, because we see that right now there is pretty much a big gap. This is sort of, on the sidelines. But we see that there's a gap in what we're importing and what we're sort of exporting to China. So we need to, sort of build a better relationship to strengthen our own exports as well, and not just have a system that's highly, reliant on imports.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Arfa. And then once again, if you have any question, please do put them in the chat box. But I'll put the next, pick the next one, and perhaps I'll try combining the next two ones, which are on the Board of Investment and Special Investment Facilitation Council. So basically, the question is, can tell us how to improve the BOI and SIFC joint ecosystem to build new, improved industries under CPEC 2.0, or and same question is also kind of how to improve the BOI and SIFC relations in a joint ecosystem to build new innovative industries under CPEC 2.2. So Aisha, Arfa, do you want to respond to it briefly?
Yeah, I think in the case of SIFC, which was designed to serve as this single window facilitator to cut through all of these bureaucratic hurdles that we have been discussing in this session, the legal mandate, because the legal mandate, it cannot legally function as this true single window platform because of the constitutional limitation that it has. Now, the SIFC is a federal body, and but all of the key sectors, such as mineral and tourism, they fall under the exclusive jurisdiction of the provincial governments because of the 18th Amendment. So SIFC lacks the legal authority to issue any binding directions to provinces for crucial investments need, for example, the land allotments or the environmental clearances or NOCs, which are very important for industrialization. So to reduce this regulatory fragmentation that does exist, in the constitutional mandate of the SIFC, some deeper governance reforms, they are required in the sense that one, through primary legislation amendment to give it its enforceable authority, for it to truly function as the one window facilitation entity that it was envisioned to be. And also, since there is already a body which is called the Council of Common Interests, which sort of for specific collaboration between the provincial and federal authorities, it does exist, but it might not be tailored for the day-to-day and sector-specific collaboration that is required in the case of this specific jurisdiction dispute that exists. So perhaps tailoring that CCI, the Council of Common Trust, to this for this day-to-day sector-specific collaboration between the federal center and the provinces, which is very much needed for to sort of cut through these administrative frictions that exist. So I feel like that SIFC's mandate for it to truly to truly authorize it, we need to give it that authority through some legal reforms.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Aisha. And perhaps, Arfa, if you want to add, I'll just put in my ones. And I think Aisha is very really to the point. So basically, I think perhaps not speaking very loudly, the challenge that eventually came in is that BO and IFC operated with some overlapping mandates, but very again, this is going to be what I'm going to say is going to be my opinion, but kind of with a very unclear division of work, which kind of diluted the accountability process and also kind of created two parallel windows for the investor. What could actually work, or what a workable arrangement would be, perhaps also to kind of treat see as the apex coordination in a kind of a fast track decision making. That was what was kind of intended for why it was introduced as kind of a fast tracking decision making body for strategic investments, particularly the G2G transactions with China and the CPEC 2.0, while BOI is kind of repositioned as the technical and as well as the operational arm responsible for SEZ administration, investor, what you say, aftercare, and also some B2B facilitation. So even within BOI itself, the structure could also be very clearly demarcated across different verticals. And this is something I actually think should be done. That is there should be a G2G desk for sovereign and SOE engagements, a B2B desk with a regulatory authority over private Chinese and other foreign investor zones, and also perhaps a conventional development vertical for even domestic industrial promotions as well. So, I mean, again, the point basically in response to the question is that there's need for a joint ecosystem to actually deliver new industries under the CPEG. So, I think this would actually need different alignments. Perhaps SIFC strategic prioritization of the value chains that previously I think I've also kind of pointed out to should flow very much directly into BOI's zone level planning, so that these sectors targeting SEZ location are also coherent rather than kind of going parallel. So that's the main area that we actually need to address. Second, the two bodies should kind of also perhaps jointly maintain a single project pipeline and a one window facilitation interface for investors. And that kind of eliminates the current duplication where investors navigate kind of the both of the channels. And third, perhaps, and perhaps even something that is not spoken of this much, is also very good coordination. And that is something I'm going to say again is really, really important and needed, is the regulatory coordination between NEPRA, FBR, provincial SEZ development corporations, and also some of the line ministries. That should be channeled through a standing working group with defined turnaround timelines, so that the issues like SEZ specific tariffs, captive licensing, we have actually been talked about, and perhaps Arfa mentioned a few of others as well, such as, I mean, title transfer is also something really, really tricky if you actually go into if you look into the operational regularity of the SEZs. That title transfer is actually one of the very key challenges that are coming out. So the objective is clear: industrial policies find SEZ sets direction, and BOE kind of also executes, and need to kind of operate in a joint environment. Let me see if Arfa, do you want to add on to any point? Please go ahead.
Sir, I absolutely agree everything that you said is absolutely spot on. And we're seeing that BOI and SAFC are sort of having a merger as well. We saw the news recently. It mentioned that BOI is going to be merged into the SIFC. So I believe that could possibly, streamline processes and approvals and sort of bring more clarity for both of the organizations and bring more, what we can say, more of a unified system when both of them are integrated into each other and they have, the same things that they sort of like pursuing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arfa, Aisha. I think we're already 10 minutes above, but perhaps we do have time to take a few more questions. We're here. So yeah, let me just quickly check if yes, we have one. And that question is basically future trade frameworks must prioritize strategic import substitution and technological joint ventures rather than merely opening the floodgates to unchecked consumer imports. How we can improve in case of Pak-China relationship. So yeah, again, I'll just pitch in perhaps my 30 seconds. So I mean, again, perhaps expanding on the question is just kind of mentioning that the trade equation is perhaps not balanced. The the trade between Pakistan and China is a lot lopsided because Pakistan is more on the import side while the China is mainly exported. So uh, I think correcting this or addressing this actually requires moving the relationship from, again, a very market access framing in towards a more production partnership framing. Perhaps that's what I can kind of call it, with the test of trade and investment instruments is whether it builds domestic industrial capacity rather than simply kind of expanding bilateral trade volumes. And that's also, again, not a problem, but perhaps that's the point we're also seeing in with the solar PV import within Pakistan. So, but yeah, let me see if Aisha Arfa has any response against this. Please go ahead.
I think I should go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Arfa, please.
Okay, I was just about to add that as we've seen from China's green leap outward, we see that most of the economies that have been attracting this, the Chinese FDI, they sort of leveraged what they had within them, their local systems, their local raw material inputs, whatever they had, they sort of leveraged that and pitched it, and they were able to build these localized supply chains and clean technology within their countries. So I believe we sort of need to do that in Pakistan's case as well, that what raw materials or what value, what sort of like inputs we have, we can, refine them and sort of pitch them to the Chinese, and then they build these like localized chains and, moving away from sort of an import reliant system.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Aisha, you wanted to add something?
No, I think you and Arfa both have very comprehensively answered.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Aisha, Alpha. And just while we're in the process of concluding, if you have any question, if you want to add any of the points, feel free to raise your hand and we'll allow you to address that. But I think we're in the very final stages of finalizing. I mean, you have seen a very small deck. We'll shortly be kind of publishing a detailed report that kind of provides more details around each of the point, and perhaps in with all the data that we've actually collected through the consultations, so through the secondary desk review, through some of the data analysis. So the report should be available post Eid, hopefully. And that was to kind of initially present the findings coming out of it, the key recommendations coming out of it, and hopefully also I'll kind of take this opportunity that will be hosting a big Park China, it's again not a Park China business forum. It would essentially mean the same thing, but that's kind of going to be a B2B business to business engagement in Pakistan in the end of June, where we'll be officially presenting this report to all of the key industries, all of the key ministries and the line departments, with the key messages coming out from our end for this one. And in the meanwhile, if you have any comments and suggestions, please feel free to reach out to either myself, Aisha, or for any one of them with any further suggestions as well. And I think with this, let me firstly thank Aisha and Arfa for a very detailed and very comprehensive presentation. They were able to kind of cover a lot during this small time. And thank you so much, everyone, for these questions, suggestions, and comments. Really look forward to further feedbacks. We'll try disseminating this slide deck along with the follow-up email, and you can perhaps also get back to us using some of the initial data sets that you actually see coming out of those. So with this, let me once again thank you, everyone. I know it's the last working day for all of us, and we'll be going. So once again, thank you so much, and have a good Eid Mubarak to everyone. Thank you, Ji. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Thank you.